I have wrestled with God. I have questioned him. I have been angry with him. I've ignored him. And I felt rightfully so. You let this happen. You could have stopped this. Why didn't you? All that has happened. Every single bit of it. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is, even in those first moments of despair and hell on earth, he was already working so hard in me.
On Christmas Eve, 2012, Amy and Davey Grote and their families experienced one of the most horrific days any of them could ever imagine as they witnessed the sudden and traumatic loss of their daughter, Ann Rees. In times like these, one wonders how anyone can emotionally survive it, much less speak of the immediate presence and goodness of God. Today, as they mark the 10-year anniversary of Ann Rees's heavenly arrival, Amy Grote joins us and shares some powerful spiritual truths that continue to carry them as they live a life of purpose and gratitude. Welcome to A Stronger Faith, a podcast that places you in the heart of the experiences that changed people's faith and understanding of the presence of God. I'm your host, Stacy McCants, and you should know that we pray for you. We pray that God makes His presence known to you and that He draws you closer to Him through what you hear in these conversations. We ask that you listen to these conversations with the intention of hearing Him speak, and that you intentionally spend more time with Him each day, praying through the things He places on your heart. We know that God answers these prayers because many listeners speak to us of how God has shaped their faith through the experiences shared by our guests. So, if you know of someone that might be a good guest because of the way God has made His presence known in their lives, please reach out to us at astrongerfaith.com and click the button that says Recommend a Guest. Your recommendations may very well be the means by which God transforms the faith of someone else. Today's conversation is emotional at times, but it's also highly insightful as Amy Grote reveals the spiritual keys she discovered for her peace and fulfillment in the face of unimaginable pain. Please meet Amy Grote. Amy Grote, I had you recommended quite some time ago, and God's timing wasn't ready.
Yeah.
And we reconnected not long ago, and I feel like the enemy has attempted multiple times, even since then, to prevent you from sharing in this way. And
I feel the same.
yeah, I prayed through that.
Oh, me too. I just felt like I needed this huge amount of time to prepare to talk to you.
Yeah.
And then finally, months and months and months later, I just prayed about it. I'm like, God, just give me a sign. Give me a sign that I'm supposed to do this. And I'm doing dishes, and I just have this feeling like this isn't about you.
Mm-hmm.
Quit trying to prepare some message that you need to share. Just go. And I realized in that moment, this actually was the enemy.
I try to encourage people to pray through that because it's
Yeah.
coming, and not let circumstances run them away, because circumstances often are the enemy. So anyway, hey, you're here. I'm here.
Yay.
And I'm thankful to be here.
Aw.
And it's not, I'll be up front, and I know I mentioned it in the intro, but this is parts of this story are hard. The hardest thing I think in the world, and that's one of the reasons that we got to wade back into some of that water. And
I think too, for me, it's like having to go there. If I'm in a good place, and just experiencing my family, and we're having, everybody's healthy and everybody's okay, and having to go to like that dark day, which I relived for years.
mm-hmm.
Every day. I don't anymore. I don't relive those moments in my head. Like, it doesn't replay anymore. And I'm so thankful. I prayed countless hours that God take away the replay. And so having to share the story makes me have to go there, which is good. It is good. And it's good for other people to hear. And I know that. And I appreciate God giving me this story. But you're right. It is a hard story to tell. But I'm thankful you asked me to tell it. And I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. Well, so the story is your first child, Ann Rees, and you guys were married. I think you met in college, if I understand correctly, and people of faith already going in. So you had that background. You got married, and your first child passed away, 2 years old.
Yeah, she was almost 3. Her birthday party and everything was already planned. Cake ordered, invitations sent out.
So what happened?
So my birthday is Christmas Eve. My husband's is December 22nd. And it was Christmas Eve. And we were going to my dad's house for a birthday celebration, Christmas Eve celebration with everyone in our family. And, I'm pregnant with our second child. Ann Rees is almost 3 years old. Her birthday is January 11th, and this was December 24th. We were on my way to my dad's house, and I remember driving there, turning on his street, looking in the back seat. Ann Rees had fallen asleep. It had been raining. She had these cute little rain boots on. I had made her outfit. Like, I don't know why that's like important to me, because I guess just shows like a mother taking care of her child. And like, probably men don't think about the little things of like the clothing, the things that go into being a mom. Yeah.
But we have 3 and one little girl, and my wife sews and makes clothes and all this. Oh. So all that stuff that I don't understand, I understand that it exists, and
it's important to us.
So I get it.
Like, that's what I remember. I remember exactly what she was wearing because I made it,
Yeah. Go ahead.
Anyway, I remember looking in the back seat, and I have this baby in my belly, and then I've got my baby in the back seat, and I've also got my amazing husband, who is seriously my very best friend. I mean, just a gift. And I remember thinking, I'm so happy right now. I'm living my dream. And we were living close to family, and life just seemed peaceful and great and wonderful. And in that moment, I just was cherishing it. Little did I know that in a few hours that my entire existence, my entire peace, everything about my life would be completely flipped upside down. So we get to my dad's. We do a hayride. Ann Rees loved people. She loved her people. She made every single person think that they were the number one person in her life. She had such a gift. Everybody loved her because she expressed so much love to them. So, she's bebopping around in her little rain boots, and the sun came out. Ended up being a pretty day. We had a birthday celebration before we opened presents. For me and my husband, we both turned 29. So we blew out candles. Ann Rees helped us blow out candles. And then my mom's side of the family, so my parents are divorced, but thankfully everybody comes together. It's really because of Ann Rees, let's be honest. Like, just want to come together because she's so cute and everybody wants to be around her and spend the day with her. So everybody puts aside any ill thoughts or the past and comes together. And so it was just, a great day. Like my mom ends up leaving, and then my dad's side of the family, we opened gifts. And so Ann Rees got a stroller from my dad. And of course, my dad gave it to her in a box. And so he had to sit there and put it together. He's like, really? I have to put this together? I'm like, Dad, you can't give a kid a toy in a box and then not put it. But she was so excited because she was so excited about having a baby sister. And so all things baby, like, the stroller, like she was getting all the little baby doll things that year. And so she got the stroller. And so my dad has a big farm. Lots of land. And so we were on the porch, and next to the porch is a trampoline. And the big cousins are all jumping on the trampoline. And then next to that is a swing set. Now, I'm talking, the trampoline's probably, I don't know, 20 yards from us. And then the swing set's actually a little bit closer. So we're all right there, the whole family, except my mom's side that had left. My dad put the stroller together. Ann Rees starts pushing around her babies, as she called her little guys. I actually have them in glass dome in our dining room. And my girls, they cherish them, my daughters now, and they actually have taken them to school and shared about their big sister in heaven and shared the little guys. But that's the only time they ever come out of the glass dome, because we've got them protected. They're actually on her headstone as well. So my dad actually had built the swing set, and Ann Rees and I, probably a week before Christmas, before December 24th, we were there playing the swing set. My dad was so excited that he had built it. Like, he had built it for her to play on and for the other cousins, and especially for this birthday celebration for Christmas Eve that was coming up. So my nieces are both on the swing set, and Ann Rees is pushing her baby doll stroller, and we're all just hanging out on the porch. We're getting ready to leave. Like, we're 5-10 minutes from leaving. And I keep in mind I'm 8 months pregnant, I guess, with Jane. And I looked down at my phone because my mom had texted. We were going to go by my mom's house afterwards, and she had texted and said, "When are you leaving? Your dad's." And I texted back 5 minutes. And then I look up, and Ann Rees is playing swing. The girls are swinging. We're chatting, kind of cleaning up the mess of Christmas. There's boxes and whatever. We're just kind of engaging with each other. And I look back down at my phone because my mom had texted back. And whenever I looked down, I heard a crash. And then I looked up, and I saw the swing set down and everybody rushing and screaming. And I saw that the swing set was on top of Ann Rees. And, I think about it. I thought about it a lot for many years. Like, why wasn't it on her leg? Why wasn't it on her arm? We could have dealt with that. It would have just been awful, but even if her leg had to get amputated or something, but it wasn't. It was on her. Had pinned her down. The swing set had fallen while the girls were swinging on it. I think they both jumped off at the same time, and the swing set wasn't completely stable on the ground, and it fell, and she was just pushing her baby dolls, and it hit her in the back of the head. So my family, I feel like that time, my memory's terrible, but I can remember that day. Like, it slows down in my mind. That's why maybe because I relived it for years. But every second, it felt like an eternity. It felt like a whole lifetime. Everybody starts kind of going into action, trying to help her. My husband and I didn't really know the extent of it. My family, and I guess they just went into like protective mode for us, kind of rushed us to the front of the house a little bit. Like, we saw what was going on. A few minutes later, fire truck, ambulance, all get there. My husband and I are literally on the ground, face first, pretty much, just crying and praying and begging and, like, I guess still hopeful in that moment, because we just didn't know the extent. We knew that there was a lot of blood, a lot of panic, a lot of, they were doing CPR. I didn't know if she was breathing or not. And I didn't know if her heart was beating. And one of the paramedics came over to us, and she's covered in blood, her mouth. She'd been doing CPR to her. And I think we asked her, is she breathing? Or does she have a heartbeat? One of the two. And she said, I don't know. And now that I think back, I'm like, she probably knew, that they were breathing for her, or they were keeping her heart going with compressions. She probably knew that, but she didn't tell us. So they load her up in an ambulance. And in that time frame, my mom and my aunt and my stepdad and my brother and all those, everybody had left. On my mom's side of the family. So, you know, like they had just left, and then we called, or somebody called them, and they got back right when the ambulance was leaving. So they didn't see her whenever she was on the ground, and they were working on her. So we jump in the car and follow the ambulance to the hospital. And I've said this in every single thing I've ever spoke on. Whenever we walked in to that hospital, it's Christmas Eve, doctor comes out and is in a white coat, and his face was the color of his coat. And in his expression, I could just see, it's like God gave me glimpses of, the paramedic. I could see it in her face. This is bad. And then when I saw the doctor, it's like God was preparing me that, like, okay, the hope was starting to dwindle by each face I saw, just, we knew it was really bad whenever that hospital said, we can't do anything else. We've got her alive, but we can't do anything else. We're going to life flight her to Mobile. And so that's a good 30-minute drive for us on the interstate. By that time, it's dark, and they load her up. They take her to a hospital in Mobile. And we got there, the second hospital. And we get to the waiting room, and it's all like a blur, but it's a blur, but then it also is like very vivid at the same time. People start coming, my family, friends start arriving, and they basically told us that she needed to go to another hospital. I'm like, guys, come on. Like, can we get her to the right place? They didn't know if she'd make it to the other hospital or not. So they asked us if we wanted to see her. And of course we said yes. And so we went in. Oh, this is the part that just haunts me. Or it used to. I feel like God has really delivered me from the images that used to replay and the images that I used to see when I closed my eyes and at night. So we go into this room where she was, and she's laying there and completely tubes, and there's, what sticks out to me the most is the amount of blood on the floor. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, like, she's the only one in here. This is her blood. I mean, in my mind, I'm like, do y'all need to be giving her blood? Just as a mom trying to help solve this problem. Another thing that sticks out to me and seems silly, but they had shaved her head, and there's tubes coming out of her head, and in my mind, I'm like, oh no, they've shaved her head. I still had hope at this point, and I'm like, I loved her to have a bow in her hair. I know it sounds so silly, but as a mom, all these thoughts are going through my head as my child's laying here pretty much lifeless. But I still had hope, I guess, at that point. And I thought, oh my goodness, her hair is going to take so long to grow back. So strange, Stacey, and I have no idea why something like that would pop in my head. But after we didn't say goodbye to her then, because we still were hopeful, but we just prayed over her and loved on her, and we really, when I say loved on her, just kind of held her hand, because we couldn't pick her up, obviously, or anything.
She was still connected.
Yeah.
To all the things.
Yeah, and the machines were keeping her alive. So they move her, and we follow behind. And we get to the third hospital, and we get to the waiting room, and we can see the ambulance is pulled up with her, and we are rushed into this room, and the doctor comes in a little bit later, and she goes, she's coded twice now since she got here. Once in the ambulance, and then once since she got here. And we're keeping her alive. We're reviving her each time. But do you want to keep her alive? There's a possibility. We're going to do a scan on her head, but most likely she'll be a vegetable. She'll be on a machine the rest of her life. And I'm like, yes, of course, keep her alive. And my husband looks at me like, I mean, this is going on. This conversation went on in the middle of, the doctor's there, my mom's there, my stepdad's there. It's frantic also. Like, it's like, just a couple minutes. We have to make this decision. And the doctor could tell, because my husband goes, Amy, we can't do that to her. She can't live like that. And I'm like, yes, she can. I mean, what are you going to do? There's miracles. Like, things happen. Like, God brings people back from the dead. He brings them back. Who knows what could happen? Her brain could get better. So we're arguing, not really arguing, but just having a conversation that we never thought we were going to have. And the doctor goes, I can tell that you both cannot make this decision right now. So I'm going to go back and we're going to do the scan and we're going to see how she's doing and make sure that she has some brain activity. Well, we get put in this waiting room and it's like, there's no windows. It just felt like it was dark. Like they had little lamps in the corner, but everybody was sitting in like a U shape in these chairs and the whole family was in there. And I remember we were just praying. Everybody's praying and kind of, crying, but at that point, still hopeful. Like, okay, we're going to get a good scan. Like, this, but I don't think anybody actually thought that, but maybe they were saying that to us to give us hope because they had all seen her. They'd all seen how bad it was. So the doctor comes back really quickly, within 5 minutes probably. And I could see it on her face that there was no hope. And I knew that it was too soon to have had the brain scan. And I remember her just sitting down and I'm like, you're real calm. Like you went from like frantic, like busy. Now you're just sitting here. Like what's going on? But there were a few family members that weren't in the room. And so I just looked at her and said, please don't say anything right now because there's a few family members that aren't in here. And I was just trying to delay it. It was like a cousin, that like our immediate family was there. And then we got those people in the room. And she told us that Ann Rees had coded again and they couldn't bring her back. So at 9:45 on December 24th, she went to heaven. And now we share I have an earthly birthday on that day and she has a heavenly birthday on that day. So they asked us if we wanted to see her. And just going back to like her saying that Ann Rees is gone. I can it's like an out of body experience. Like I can see myself like looking down and I can see the people around us and just complete devastation, shock, the amount of crying and like wailing. Like I made noises that I didn't even know that I could make and then couldn't catch my breath in the next second. So we did want to see her. So they got her cleaned up. Her clothes were ruined, the clothes that I'd made her. I still to this day, I guess they just threw them away. So and I'm in a wheelchair because I'm 8 months pregnant and they're like, I couldn't even walk, just out of pure devastation and just, I think my body was just in shock. And so we go to this room and all the tubes were gone. And she's laying on this white bed, this little, like a gurney. And, they pull back the curtain and there she is. And the first thing I noticed was that she was in different clothes. And her rain boots were gone. Like what I had put her in that day. And what I had made for her and what it was just all gone. And she was gone. But she looked so peaceful. She looked so angelic. It didn't matter what she had on. It didn't matter that her hair was shaved and that she had bandages. She had her head was mostly wrapped because I guess there's so much damage. But her face was completely intact. Her face just looked so angelic, and her little hands were cold, but still had a little warmth to them. And they asked if we wanted to hold her. And of course we did. And we held her and we sang to her. We let other people hold her. Anybody who wanted to. Friends. Nobody wanted to. Nobody wanted to put her down or have their turn end. And I guess I didn't realize when we finally left the hospital, it was probably, 2 a.m. I didn't know that was the last time I was going to be able to hold her. And one of my regrets is leaving. Because I would have stayed there. I would have just slept there. I would have, as long as they would have let me. It was the hardest thing that I've ever had to do. But also one of the most beautiful at the same time. Because I've never seen anybody at such peace. And I know her presence was there with us. I know. And God was just right there. I mean, but we left that day, that night, never the same. The ride home, and you can't even process it, You can't process what's going on while it's going on. You just have to live in the moment, in the present, and try to breathe. And it didn't feel real the next day. We barely slept. I know we got back to my mom. We went to my mom's house. And I remember I felt like I needed a bath. It had been a long day. And I got in my mom's big bathtub. And my mom literally sat there and bathed me, which she hadn't done since I was, 4, 5? But yeah, that was the beginning of the second chapter of our lives.
I'm trying to put myself in the situations with you all. And for me, it feels like there is some sort of threshold of being present in reality that my brain can process. And this crosses the line on that. To be in a place on Christmas Eve, on your birthday, just a couple of weeks away from delivering your second child, in probably some of the most joyful moments you could imagine, to where you had to be late night Christmas Eve when normally there are wide-eyed kids, cookies and milk, Santa's imminent arrival, and you guys are in the closest place to hell you're ever going to know. It crosses that threshold for me, and I can't get my emotions in check when I consider the place you guys were in. And I can't get my ability to survive that in a safe, within parameters that it's going to be okay there. Waking up, whatever sleep you get, and you have to, because you're so exhausted in every way imaginable. But when you wake up after something terrible or whatever, and you think, and it like comes back and it overwhelms you again. It's like, oh my God, that's real.
Yeah. Feels like you never stop crying. Like you just go to sleep crying and you wake up crying. And you're like, did I cry all night while my eyes were closed?
Yeah. I don't understand how I don't understand how people navigate. I have deep compassion for people who really struggle. I understand the depth that it must take people that causes many to not survive that.
Yeah.
I just don't know how I would. I feel like I'm strong in things. I can't price it. And I know you had the service. I know that you had ordered her birthday cake and many other aspects of this. But you said in there somewhere that you felt like God was present.
Mm-hmm.
Did you?
Oh, yeah.
In those moments,
oh,
what do you mean you felt like God was present?
Holding Ann Rees. Me holding her here on earth, her earthly body with no life in it. I knew without a doubt that God was holding her spirit and her soul in heaven. There was no doubt in my mind.
You felt that?
Oh, yeah. I could see it on her face. That's what I say. Like, she just looked so at peace. It's like her job here was done. And she was in the best place while we were having the worst moments. I absolutely felt it. And it's like I always knew it, like growing up, that's what would happen. But in that moment, it was just undeniable that while we were suffering with her earthly body, just wanting so badly to breathe life back into her, that God had her. Because what else are you going to do? What else are you going to feel?
You're going to be mad.
And I went there.
And you're going to scream at him.
I did. Many times.
And you may even deny him.
But not in that moment.
But you may even deny him.
For sure. Oh, I had moments after that. In the middle of the night. Middle of the night was the worst for me. I would stay up as late as I possibly could.
Yeah.
Because I was like, if I stay, and I make everybody stay up with me. I was probably a little annoying. And they did. Whoever was at my mom's house, because we stayed at my mom's house for a chunk of time until Janie was born. I would make everybody stay up. It'd be 2 o'clock in the morning. Everybody's like laid on the sofa like, okay, can we go to bed now? And I'm like, okay, yes, I'm going to go try to close my eyes. And I would just be so tired that I physically could not keep my eyes open anymore.
Yeah.
But in the moments whenever I did wake up in the middle of the night, and I'm by myself and I'm having to go there with God, I was like, get out of here. I don't even want to talk to you. Because, I feel like I'm thinking through it and I'm praying, but I'm like not really praying. I'm really just, my mind is thinking, and I'm annoyed that he's trying to even comfort me. Like, I got her, she's with me in heaven. Like, I know all these things, but I'm so annoyed at you. I'm so mad that you've taken my precious child. And there were many times that I was like, nope, God, no, I don't even want to hear it. Don't come to me. I don't deal with that anymore, but there were a lot of dark conversations and anger and just doubt. But my doubt always turned into, you're going to think this maybe is funny or crazy, I don't know. My doubt always turned into, okay, God, you better be real. This better be real, because if it's not real, then I don't know where my child is. But this better be real, because I'm going to believe you that heaven is real and I will see her again. And that is where I found hope. And I guess God just said, okay, I'll let you believe whatever. I'm still here. I can hear him. I can see and hear his conversation in heaven with like Jesus and Ann Rees. And Ann Rees is like, keep pressing her, Mom. I mean, keep going, pursuing my mom. She's okay. She's going to be okay. Even though those conversations probably did not happen. In my mind, I'm like, I can just see her rallying for me in heaven. Like, she's going to turn this around. Like, she's going to trust you again and going to have a relationship with you again.
I'm surprised and interested in how quickly you were in a place of, peace is probably the wrong word there. It's probably not even close. In a place of recognizing her as being okay. Because it seems like you even did that while you were at the hospital. And I would expect some spiritual grappling for sure. I think God wants us to do that. But then you kind of get back to it, and you said you replayed what you saw. And I can't imagine the trauma of, by far, the most precious human being you will ever know on this earth.
Mm-hmm.
I got kids. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't...
Even when they're acting out, they're still...
I can't picture them in that... it just makes me shake right now.
Yeah.
And to try to go in, help and fix, and I just can't. So, how do you hold on to the sovereignty and the goodness of God in the face of what you saw took your child?
I think it's in looking back, and during when it was all fresh and new, it was really hard. It was just living in the present, putting one foot in front of the other, not really processing what was going on. And keep in mind, I'm pregnant. I remember we went to the doctor like the day after Ann Rees passed away just to check on Janie, make sure she was okay. She had actually had, this is coming to me now, because whenever we did her 20-week scan, she had some spots on her heart. And I remember David and I and Ann Rees were all in that ultrasound. And because we found out what the baby was. It was a girl, and we were so excited. And so Ann Rees went to the ultrasound with us, but my husband had to leave the ultrasound early. But he didn't know anything was wrong. So then I go meet with the doctor, and she's like, okay, well, we have two things we're a little concerned about. it looks like there's 2 spots on her heart. And that can indicate many different things. And she's sending me to a specialist. So, of course, I call my husband, tell him what's going on. Call my mom, tell her what's going on. Well, my mom starts researching it. And there's lots of different things that it could have been. Holes in the heart, indication of Down syndrome, just lots of different things. So we went to the specialist. They did the ultrasound and they're like, okay, it's 2 spots on her heart. Nothing else is wrong. We do not see anything else wrong. Every blood test came back normal. We're just going to watch it. And that's 20 weeks pregnant. So fast forward to the day after or 2 days after Ann Rees passed away. We still don't know at that point what's going on with Janie's heart. So, we've got one child that's in heaven. Now we've got a baby that's in the womb that could possibly have some issues. So that 2 days after she passed away, we go to the doctor, and in my mind, I'm thinking, when you go to the doctors like that, you're gonna have to sit in the waiting room forever. And I'm a basket case, can barely walk into the doctor's office, and thankfully they just took us straight to ultrasound, and right away they look at her heart, and the spots were totally gone. No indication of them whatsoever. And all I could think was that was God. It had to be. He took care of that so that we didn't have to think about it anymore, or there were no problems with Janie, and she was going to be healthy, and we didn't have to worry about it because I still had like 3 weeks left. But I feel like in that moment, very early on, I saw God and his hand in that, and that we needed to be thankful that God had made that happen.
So you're choosing. Because I don't disagree with what you're saying, that God in that moment demonstrated, it's like the blind man, Jesus, they said, who sinned, this guy or his parents? And he's like, it's not because anybody sinned, so that we could see the glory of God, right? So I get that. I believe that. But you haven't even had the service for Ann Rees yet. And she's gone.
I know.
And it was tough. And for you to choose that God's in control still.
I had to.
And that he is good.
Yeah.
How do you...
I don't know.
He's supposed to be infinitely good. How in the heck does that reconcile itself with what you just saw?
I think I always knew it. I always believed that he was good. And God had prepared me in ways like my grandmother, who I was very close with, my dad's mom passed away. And I thought this was a big deal then, right before my junior prom. And I had to cancel it. And this woman was so godly and so, to me, just walked around with this like grace that God had given her. And, I saw her go through a really hard disease, which was Alzheimer's. And we still, praise God through that, even though it was hard. And then I feel like my grandmother, my mom's mom, was diagnosed with cancer after my husband and I got engaged. And before we got married, Wednesday before we got married on a Saturday, she passed away. I just feel like those things happen, and I had to wrestle with God in those moments. And he was preparing me for not turning against him whenever the really hard thing came. Now, Stacy, I have wrestled with God. I have questioned him. I have been angry with him. I've ignored him. And I felt rightfully so. You let this happen. You could have stopped this. Why didn't you? All that has happened. Every single bit of it. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is even in those first moments of despair and hell on earth, he was already working so hard in me. He was already pressing every button of faith that I had. And I just had this sense of, what other choice do I have? Where is she if she's not in heaven? And the only way that I could see her again is if I continue down my road of faith. And maybe that's the complete wrong way to think of it. Like, I'm going to believe in you, God, because there's a possibility that I get to see her again. You know, I've had turning points since then, of course, but it was probably just selfish faith, if you will.
Yeah, but you got to kind of believe that a little bit. I'm wondering, I'm trying to get to, does this come about because of this is the way you were raised? I guess that's where I'm wondering. Is this something that you were taught when you were young and you believed it because people you trusted and knew had experienced things and they still held on to the sovereignty of God? Or was it because you were deep in your faith and you knew and you studied scripture and you understand what Jesus taught and that we don't have a cakewalk, but ultimately we're all going to be in the kingdom with him, and that if the story wasn't over? Or was it just wishful thinking?
Maybe all of the above. I was raised in church. Like I said, my grandmothers were very faithful women. So was my mom, but I even saw it deeper in them. And then our family, of course, we went to church. And I do remember even as a youth group, like that pre-youth group, you know, where you're probably like my daughter's age, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being in church and being the first one with my arms lifted high. Not because I was trying to be showy or anything. It's just how I felt. And maybe that carried on into my adulthood. And I did, as a teenager, backslide and did stupid stuff that teenagers do and didn't feel as close to God. And then I met my husband, and we both were kind of in a party scene a little bit, and not terribly, but just not going to church, college kids. And then we kind of started going to church together again. And he came from a family of faith, and we went to a Christian school and had a lot of head knowledge that I didn't have. But I think that I think he and I getting together and him bringing the practical side of it to me was very impactful to me. And it kind of cultivated this faith of praising God, but also knowing this is really, really real historically. So we get married, and I started Bible study at my school for teachers. Just felt it tugging on my heart. We would meet after school and talk, and those relationships were building, more impactful relationships, deep conversations, people being real about their hard times. I guess with the death of my grandmother during that very precious time for our family and in my life, getting married, starting my journey as an adult, and my husband and I were 23 when we got married, so we were so young. I do feel like God had put me in a place where I already knew that bad things were going to happen to me, that I was going to walk through hard things. I didn't know what they were, but I think that he just prepared me. He prepared me along the way.
Yeah, I get to a place where, and I've seen people respond this way, say, nope, don't expect me to trust in a God who does something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the goodness in that? Did you have to take my child? Did you have to affect our lives in this way?
And I went there.
Yeah.
Absolutely I did. But I was grounded. So back to your question, was this, the faith that you grew up with? Yes. Was it that I was spiritual and knew that it was real? Yes. Was it also wishful thinking? Absolutely. It was a cultivation of all of those together that helped me wrestle with God and that helped me get through those, because I just went back to the truth every time I'd go through. And also writing. Writing was huge for me.
Yeah, sort of journaling it out. Yeah.
Yes. And then this Facebook page my friends developed. And in those dark, dark moments, it was always in the bathtub. I have no idea why, but I would go sit in the bathtub and I would be as mad or as angry or sad. You feel very alone and isolated with grief as well. And I don't like to feel lonely. So there were moments of just, okay, I'm going in the bathtub. I'd have my phone. I'd open my notes and I would write how upset I was and how mad I was and how could God do this? And I do want to turn away from him. And then all of a sudden, my thoughts would shift. And it wasn't like I was praying. You know, I was talking to quote unquote myself, which I guess is essentially what I was doing, was praying, and didn't even realize it. But God would turn my thoughts around. And in the words that I was writing, all of a sudden I'm thanking him instead of being upset with him. I'm thanking him for the gift that I got to live with her, for Ann Rees, and how wonderful and how amazing it was. And now I have this baby in my belly, and what a gift she was going to be to us. What a gift that you've taken away those spots on our heart. It would turn into thankfulness. And I wouldn't even realize I was doing it. And I would write it, and then I would look up a verse on something, taking it totally out of context, I'm sure. But that verse would make me feel better. And then I'd post it on Facebook, and people would start responding, and they would say that they were praying for us. And those prayers, I feel like those prayers carried me. I feel like all those people that were following the Facebook page and responding to the posts that I was making, because I posted just about every day for a year. And my really dark feelings, and people all over the world, well, I guess not technically all over the world, but all over the country and some places in the world were responding with prayers. And I feel like so many of those prayers were helping us carry a burden that we could not carry on our own.
It's interesting. You talk about this journaling deal that you did, which would turn into you sharing those with other people. What it sounds like to me is you spent a lot of time in prayer. And prayer looks different for different people. And a lot of times I'll find myself in prayer early in the morning. So I carve out time there. And it's interesting. Not every time I go into prayer am I in some sort of really spiritual place. There are times where my mind's all over the place, or something's happened and I'm focused. And it's like, okay, I'm not feeling super spiritual. Maybe I just don't pray right now because I'm not right in that place. And it's like, is that how God would he say, yeah, don't worry about praying right now because you're not in a real meditative type place? I think he's saying, no, come on anyway, right? Yeah. Just talk. And I'll do that, and I'll get into not feeling super prairie, so to speak.
That's a word.
But yeah, except it means something else. But yeah, and then go into prayer anyway. Say, God, I'm not feeling super spiritual right now, but I'm coming to you because it's you, and I'm just going to. And then my mind will go into other places in the prayer, and I'll try to bring myself back to focusing on Him. But I also sometimes realize, or thinking maybe I'm wrong, and it's just ADD, and I'm all over the place.
Same.
But maybe it's also me expressing those things to Him.
Yeah.
So it's not quote unquote prayer like we would think, where it's like,
dear God,
dear God this and God that, and
right.
But that it's like, as I am in prayer, as I am with myself, as I'm thinking these things, it's me expressing them. It's me reconciling them. It's me explaining them. And I think he calls us to call him Father. He calls us to call him Father because he wants us to be in that kind of relationship.
Conversation.
And if you think and a lot of people don't have great dads, I get that. But if you know or just imagine the greatest dad, the greatest dad wants you spilling that stuff to him. He wants you to pour your heart out. And I think that's what I find myself doing that and not feeling as guilty about not being in the format of prayer that I think prayer is supposed to be. I have plenty of times for that. But it seems like when you describe this process for you, where you got into this place where you were in this prayerful, meditative, reflective, I've got to get this stuff out state, I think you're in prayer.
Yeah.
And I think that the more time you spent in prayer, at least it sounds like it to me, the more God was able to open your eyes to the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it landed on him. Like those thoughts that I was having, and it's like you don't realize you're praying, but they're not going out in space.
Yeah.
They're landing on him, and he's just bouncing them back to you in a beautiful way and turning it around. And you're so right, because I don't think I've ever thought about it like that. Like that was me writing and praying in my own way. And it's funny because I'm sitting here, I have my journals in front of me. That's what I do. And I actually do have prayers in here, and I do have those more formal prayers like you're describing. But you're right. Most of my inner dialogue is a prayer, and he's turning it around.
Yeah, where does God live, right?
Yeah.
He lives inside of us in the deepest places. I think about the Old Testament and the whole idea. He had them create this tent, and then in the tent it was the innermost part was called the Holy of Holies, where only the highest priest went, and only once a year, because that's where God lives. That's where he dwells. Yeah. And Jesus said, "That's with me that changes. That Holy of Holies is inside of you."
Yeah.
Nobody can affect that. So God's dwelling place is inside of us. So it's not like we can go journal and escape God's presence.
Right.
He is more intimately in that place than you are.
Even when I didn't want him to be. Even when I was angry.
And you didn't, yeah. And he's pulling a lot of these things out of you. And he's there as you feel nauseous, thinking about the things that are tearing you up. And, and he's right there. He's there. He's the only one that's there.
And how about this? What did he do with those? He had me put them on Facebook for people to read. And you don't even know how many people have told me those words helped them with whatever situation they were going through.
So you became
or helped them see God.
You became a minister.
I didn't even know it. Wasn't trying, for sure.
So when I ask you the question, what causes you to hang on to this notion that God is sovereign and good? It sounds like you wrestled through prayer in it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Stacey, because I did not realize that.
Right.
Isn't that crazy, though? Like, just sitting here 10 years later, almost, going, and like an epiphany in my mind, just talking through it with you, just how good God is in this moment, teaching me something that I didn't realize, that it was prayerful. You're right. That's how I saw God. That's how I kept him right in my heart.
So would you say with let's say somebody's just entering in this place, this is almost 10 years ago, and we've gotten together here because we're approaching this December 24th, this Christmas Eve will be 10 years. Her birthday should be 13?
Yes, 13, because it's 2002. 2003 is, January.
And that's on the
January 18th.
Yes. Yep. And I was going somewhere with that before I
you were saying, what would I say to someone who's just starting this journey?
Yeah, that's a question. What would you, somebody's fresh
Well,
into
I
this.
have. I've literally spoken to many people who are on this journey, and I do give them advice. I give them practical advice, what people said to me, my pastor said, go ahead and forgive people before they speak because they're going to say some really
nobody knows what
dumb
to say.
things. I remember this one lady compared her grief to like her losing her dog. And I'm like, that's not the same. But I guess thank you for thinking of me. So that was a big one. I always say that to people, but what I'm probably going to say from now on after having this conversation is just maybe write it down, like write your feelings down. And if you're not a writer, it's okay. It doesn't have to be elegant. It doesn't have to be profound, but just write it down and seek him and let be open to him in those moments and him helping you through. Like, I guess that's what I would say. What would you say?
Well, and I haven't been there, but I'm listening to you, and I don't understand how somebody continues, and I believe in God, and I hope I would do this too, but when I try to experience it as much as I can with you as you describe it, it's very difficult, and I understand why people are outraged that God would allow a thing like this. But it sounds like what you did is you just spilled it all in prayer, and you journaled it, and you wrote it down, and you didn't leave anything on the table. You let it go. And in the times where you were grappling with it and praying through it and talking about it and journaling it or whatever, God showed you different ways of seeing stuff. And it sounds like what you did. I don't know what I would say because I haven't done it.
I know. I guess I'm just, you just put that in the perfect, turned it around and made me just realize that that's exactly what I was doing.
But that happened over time.
Yeah, sure.
And Janie was born literally 18 days later. Now, we've had 3 kids, and leading up to each one of those is a joyous time. And it's not like we got used to having kids and it wasn't joyful anymore. It was always joyful. Was hers?
Okay, so I remember sitting in the kitchen before she was born, and I was grappling with, there's no way that I'm going to love this baby. There's 0% chance. And I'm just sobbing. There's people in the house, and one of my mom's best friends comes over, and I was telling her about it, and I was like, how am I ever going to love this baby? And the reason that I felt that way was because I thought, I can't love this baby because what if she's taken away from me? What if I put my love in her and then she's also taken away? I cannot bury another child. I just can't do it. And I remember her just saying, just pray about it. Trust that God's going to give you love for her. And really, I don't even think she knew what to say in that moment. But I got it off my chest and ended up going into labor, and 17 days later, and then went to the hospital in the middle of the night. It's funny, this little side note, funny story. We were staying at my mom's house. And so I wake up my husband. I'm like, I think I'm in labor. And he jumps out of bed and he goes, okay, do I have time to take a shower? And I'm like, okay.
Maybe you didn't hear me.
I'm literally bending over, like having contractions I waited till the last minute to even wake you up. So I'm like, sure, go ahead. Then I go wake up my mom, and my mom jumps out of bed because they're all expecting it, and she goes, do I have time to take a shower?
It's like, all right, people, I'll just drive myself. Don't worry about it.
Can anybody get an Uber? Ubers weren't around back then. But anyway, so go into labor with her. I've always wanted children. Like, I've always felt like Ann Rees was the biggest gift that I could have ever gotten. A little girl, dress her cute. Back to the dressing. What is up with that? Maybe it's a connection with your wife.
Yeah.
So that void in those 18 days I didn't even realize how big that was as far as having someone to take care of and being a mother to. And when she was born and I heard her cry, and I mean, Jane, when she was born, was the prettiest baby, tiny, tiny little thing, because she was born 3 weeks early, and which is another thing because 18 means life in Hebrew, and I feel like God gave us life after death through Janie. And actually, Janie's name means God's gracious gift. So
Ann Rees was born on the 18th.
yeah.
Janie was born 18 days
Yeah.
after she passed.
I mean, God's gracious gift after death, of life after death. So as soon as she was born, I just looked in her little adorable face and had a flood of thankfulness that God had given me. And my husband and I were not trying for a January birthday. We actually were hoping for like a March, April, May, because mine and his birthdays were December. Ann Reese's was January. We're like, we needed to spread it all out a little bit. So Jane, just conceiving her was, oh man, another January birthday. Like that's kind of how we felt. Unfortunately, she wasn't part of our plan. We were waiting just a little bit longer for her, and God showed up in the details. It could only, in my mind, I'm like, it could only be God. I think he knew I couldn't have waited till spring.
Yeah, the spots.
Yeah,
and
I couldn't wait.
Yeah.
18 days was about it I had. Honestly, my mom had, the day before I went into labor, so we were still living at her house and had been there since Ann Rees passed away, since Christmas Eve. And she had said, you know what, because I still had 3 weeks left for the baby. And she said, you and Davey probably need to think about going home. And I'm like, oh, heck no. I cannot walk into my house without Ann Rees.
Yeah, Ann Rees is all over that place.
Yeah, and without Jane. I cannot do it. And so I prayed so hard. I'm like, Lord, please, 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 please. You know, because my mom was like, okay, I don't remember what day she was born, but she said by the weekend, you know, if you haven't had the baby, maybe you guys should consider it. She wasn't necessarily kicking us out.
You hadn't been back since
Hadn't been back.
Christmas Eve.
Okay, I take that back. My mom and I went back one day.
Okay.
But we tore off the Band-Aid. We just decided, let's just go. It was awful. Literally stayed there for we went to get something. There was a purpose, and I can't remember what it was. But hadn't stayed there long. Hadn't been there with my husband, hadn't slept there, nothing like that. So I just feel like God really showed up big time in the details of every part of our story. Every part of it. There's so many things that happen where I go, okay, there's no way that could be.
You got your eyes on God if you're doing that. I think you have your eyes on God when you see him in those things. I mean, hearing a voice, an audible voice, or seeing some sort of light, or just some sort of crazy supernatural thing, I get that. That's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I'm talking to a person who has her heart set on God.
I guess. I don't know, Stacey. I do feel you. I do hear what you're saying, but there are definitely moments of doubt where I'm going.
That didn't mean you didn't have doubt.
Right.
But even in the doubt, your eyes are on God.
Yeah.
It's not like you walk around without him. It doesn't seem like to me. Very long, at least, anyway.
Now, the enemy does try to come in and go, knock, knock.
Yeah.
But
do you spend time with him? What is your time with God look like today?
These days, I don't know. I unfortunately don't get up super early and have that. I try to. It doesn't always work out because my kids think I am a professional Bible reader and they're like, my mom highlights in her Bible like you've never seen. They're one day, I can't remember, because they see me, in the mornings, a lot of times they'll come down and I'm reading my Bible or making notes or journaling, and it's not every day.
They'll never forget that, That's a big part of their faith
Yeah.
foundation.
But a lot of times I do it after I drop them off.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not every day that they see it. Now, I also don't get that kind of quiet time in every single day.
But
like
you're
I
spending
want
time
to.
with God. Yeah, you got a deal you do, right?
Oh, yeah. And then I also just stay in prayer.
Let me ask you this. Since then, where have you seen the enemy attack?
Doubt, self-doubt, self-reliance, grief can be very lonely. A lot of people also give you a lot of excuses, especially early on. I think anybody would have given me any excuse for any behavior, any need I needed. I could have become a drug addict and committed suicide, and I think people would have just given me an excuse of, I may have done the same thing.
Yeah.
So because of that, I feel like the enemy has gotten me to think about self too much and not my true purpose, which is God has given me a story. God has given Ann Rees He gave her short days on earth, short years, not many at all. But think about, like, she's been in heaven now for 10 years, and those 10 years have impacted the kingdom countless times. I mean, I think about the army when I get to heaven of people who are standing behind Ann Rees that got to heaven that say, thank you for sharing her story.
Yeah.
But with that said, I feel like the enemy gets in my head. You're not good enough to share her story. You're not in the right place. You haven't prepared enough. You don't really know the scriptures. Just a distraction. Complete self-doubt, but also, I'm just not it's not a good season. I'm not in a good place. I typically am a pretty joyful person and don't get down very much, except of course whenever we come to holidays and things, but I'm able to really turn to God and the eternity vision and pick myself up and try to celebrate and be thankful for my living daughters and family who are here on earth and try to enjoy every second. Because
that's in you there. That's been pretty clear in the conversations we've had, and that's not. You have this seem to have this temperament of positivity, and even in the face of this, and when you go as quickly as you did to seeing the presence of God, even that day, I think that's the presence of the Holy Spirit. And and people, I want that in people, and I want that in me. And it's not always in me. It's in me a lot more now than it ever used to be. Mm-hmm. But I think people are searching for that. How do I find that joy? How do I find the presence of the Holy Spirit? How do I just talk myself into believing that God is good, even though I just watch my child suffer and die? I can't do that, but I'm going to just keep saying it until it's kind of like, you say it long enough and it'll eventually happen. But some of the places that I find that the enemy attacks in situations similar to this, blame, guilt. Sometimes
guilt and blame in Ann Rees's death, or okay, I really and truly only my dad built the swing set that Ann Rees was swinging on, like I said, and I never blamed him.
So these are places that I believe that the enemy does attack. Right? This is a unbelievable freak. Tragic accident. There's clearly no guilt to be laid anywhere. As humans, we like to lay blame and guilt. Jesus didn't do that. He spoke the truth. But grace was his thing. Right. It wasn't guilt and blame and all those things. Those are tools of the enemy. And so when parents, grandparents, people that were present or nearby, we all go to a place of, why was I on my phone? Why couldn't I have been engaged with her? Why what did I do wrong on the swing set, and get mired in this place where the enemy is like, all right, I got you diving down this hole with me now.
Let's go.
Yeah. Relationship damage, there's having tension between you and your dad, or even you and your husband, that sometimes it's common for relationships to be torn apart. I've talked to people who have lost children, and they looked at each other and said, this is not going to happen to us, and fought to make sure it didn't. But I've known many couples that have lost their marriages because of child loss.
And we were warned about that from our pastor, like December 26th.
Yeah.
And we started counseling right away, Christian counseling. And my husband is just literally, you have to meet him. He is the best person I know.
That's awesome.
Like if I were fighting this journey on my own, who knows where I'd be.
That's right.
But God gave us to each other, and we have, I asked him yesterday, can you give me something like that I could share? How did we keep our marriage? How did we keep going? And he's so practical. This is what he said. He goes, well, I mean, you had a baby in your belly. Like, what were we going to do? I'm like,
that's good.
Okay.
That's a gift from God. And I just wonder where the enemy may have attacked you guys. And maybe you guys were rich in your faith, and we're like, we're not going to go there. We identify guilt and blame and tension and relationship damage as tools of the enemy, and we're just not going to give them a foothold.
I didn't blame, because I decided very early on that wasn't an option. My husband did too. My husband and I talked about that a lot in counseling, that that was out of the question to blame anyone for Ann Rees's death. So blame was never anything we dealt with. Guilt, Ann Rees had such a good life. I guess guilt was just never anything we dealt with either. I mean, tension, we had to learn, because we're polar opposites. I'm very extroverted. He's very introverted. We grieve very differently. There's boundaries that we had to set in place, and our counselor helped us do that. We met with her once a week. We talked about anything and everything. The next steps. What was our family going to look like? What does it look like if he's having a hard time? Where do I stand? If I'm having a hard time, like, not to pull the other person down, to try to encourage them, if instead of pulling them down, respect the boundaries that we've set. He set a boundary on the fact that he's not going to go back to where the accident happened, which means he's not going to go back to where my dad lives. And I have to respect that. And I refuse to let the enemy come between us. I mean, it is not going to happen, period. And the enemy has come in many, many ways.
Yeah.
But as far as our relationship, absolutely not. As far as me finding purpose on this earth and sharing the purpose, like, for instance, I want to write a book. The book is not in my heart in any other way. Like, if no one else reads it, I just want it for my children. And I want it for their children. And I want them to know how mom and dad got through this. And I want them to always be pointed to the Lord and to heaven. And I don't want them to read it from the Facebook page, have to start like at the beginning and go through all that. I want them to have a bound book that is words from mom, what happened, how we got through it, or how we lived, because I think you never get through it.
Right.
But how we live simultaneously with heartache and also joy. But the enemy is coming in that. He's distracting me. And I started writing my book, the first chapter, October 6th last year. So happy about it. I mean, 9 years in. Finally just sat down, started writing. So back up a little bit. It was the first year, 2021, that I didn't have a little one at home. So I'd had Ann Rees at home and then Janie at home, like doing Mother's Day out, but still, basically long periods of time where I'm here by myself have time to write a book. So, or to do whatever I need to do. So Alice, which is our youngest, she's 6. She started school 2021. Thank you. Kindergarten. So she's gone all day. And so it took until October 6th. And I finally sat down because that's my goal. I'm like, that year, I'm going to write the book. Well, let me tell you, unforeseen things happened with our house. We had some unexpected renovations to do. We had a lot of distractions after October 6th. After I finished chapter 1, felt good about it, walked away from my computer thinking, I'll be there tomorrow. I'll be there the next day. I'll get this done this year. And let me tell you, it is November 11th, 2022.
22.
And I have not gone back to my computer.
Since that day? Since chapter 1?
Since chapter 1.
You need chapter 2, huh?
I do, and I really feel that it is the enemy distracting me. We had a lot of sickness after that. We had, like I said, some house stuff we had to deal with. I feel like the enemy put something in my mind that if I sit back down at my computer and write, if I get it out, something else bad's going to happen.
Well, there's great purpose in what you're doing, and the cool thing that God does in these situations is certainly the enemy does try to knock us off course, but God always turns those things into an advantage for his kingdom. So it's the old, was it Romans 8:28? We know for those who love God, all things work together for good. So you've gotten some experiences probably in that time that are going to better position you to write well. And so I do expect you to pick that up because it is a work of God through you. You've given yourself to him clearly. Sounds like as far as the enemy attack stuff goes, when I listen to you describe that, it sounds like it's kind of like preventative medicine. Mm-hmm. It's not like, okay, I get a diagnosis and now I've got to make all these changes to try to. It's like, no, I just decided to eat very healthy before the diagnosis or before I could get those things. And so it sounds to me like, at least with you and Dave and what's going on here, your faith was in a position already. You guys understood that these things could creep in. You went into counseling like quickly, right? Before you necessarily...
Right after Janie was born. I was nursing her in counseling sessions.
So you weren't feeling the consequences of long-term, burying things, and now you've got all this work to do. And you guys did that right away. It was almost like, hey, we're gonna preemptively strike these things, and so that's awesome because people don't do that.
Well, and it came to us because we had people in our lives who pointed us in that direction as well.
You had the Holy Spirit moving in your life, which used those people to do those things, true. And that's awesome. I see the Holy Spirit moving through you guys. A lot of people I know that have been in similar situations spend a lot of time in super dark places. Yeah. And that's not to say that you guys aren't in dark places. I know you are. But, I mean, they get in a place where you can't get back out of type stuff. And you guys didn't let the vessel get down that low.
Didn't. And I almost hate saying that because...
It makes it sound like it's you. I get it. It's not you, though, right?
Yeah. Definitely.
You turned to God.
Yeah.
You chose to look for him instead of blame him. It doesn't mean that you didn't fire and throw some rocks at him and be mad. And I think he just comforts us and he's like, it's my child.
Yeah.
They've been through something really hard and they don't understand it. And this is how it is. And it's okay. I'm not going to condemn them for not understanding.
Yeah.
They can't see like I see.
And another interesting thing, and I don't want this to come off as what kind of self-righteous, but we never took medicine ever to help us through. And that is not because I just said, we're not taking medicine. We're going to get through this with the Holy Spirit. It's because God had a baby in my womb.
Yep.
And then I chose to nurse this baby. And I looked at the side effects and I was like, you know what?
I can't
do that to her.
Yeah.
And you know what? People do. And I don't want anyone to hear this and say, I don't want to give the wrong message, but this is just our story.
Yeah.
And we didn't go down that road. We probably would have if I wasn't pregnant, because doctors were giving it to me. Here,
Yeah.
they didn't know what to do.
Take this.
Take this. I think you should have this. Friends were like, I think you should get on something, help you get out of bed. And I'm like, okay, just take their advice. And then just came to the realization that I don't think we need this. My mom said very early on, we've got to walk through this, not around it.
Yeah.
And I think if I would have medicated myself, I would be dealing with it, the hard, dark stuff right now.
That's what the medication does. That's what the substance does. It walks you around it, and you never.
Yeah.
That's important. We talked about the enemy and places that you feel like maybe he didn't get a foothold. I'm sure he tries to do that on his own time or whatever, but on the opposite side of that.
The good stuff.
Yeah, have you seen, one of the things we do on this is a little different for us, is that I try to disprove the existence of God sometimes.
Huh. For people who are listening and questioning?
Yeah. I think I've got to take their position as much as possible.
Well, honestly, my story, what you're kind of pulling out of me right now, kind of sounds like it's kind of too good to be true that they got through this so easily.
Yeah.
Because that's not the case. And I don't want it to come off like that, but I just feel like it's the grace of God.
Yeah, and I want to know, are there examples of times where it wasn't just, we saw the face of God because everybody pulled in and cared for us? Okay, I get that, but people that don't believe in God experience that too, and that,
Sure.
Did you ever see anything? Did anything happen that would make a non-believer perk them up and say, "What did you just say?"
Yeah. There's actually been a few, Stacy, that I talk about mine just and your heart melting, because it had to have come from the Lord. It had to be, it just proved more and more that he's in those details. And one story that I'll share a couple with you if you want, if we have time, but one story that blows my mind. So Ann Rees had a best friend. Her name was Jenna. And, they're like, kind of grew up together since they were 6 months. It was one of my friends, Catherine and Tucker. Catherine and I went to school together. We actually lived in Gulf Shores at this time, Orange Beach, Gulf Shores, and we lived in the same community with them. And so we spent a lot of time with them. So the girls grew up together 6 months to 2, almost 3. They had a sweet bond. And Catherine and Tucker and me and David, we all had a sweet friendship, family friendship. So, of course, wrapping her little mind around that her best friend is gone was just awful. And her parents having to tell her, but she would say things like, "It's okay, Mommy," and wrap her arms around her mom and, say, "Ann Rees is okay." Things like that. And it just blew our mind, the sweet, innocent, not worried about Ann Rees being gone, very confident in she's okay. And that all came to the most amazing, I guess, head in a sense. This cat started coming around after Ann Rees passed away, a stray cat. And it started coming around. We live in the same community, just a couple of houses down, and hanging out on their porch. Well, they started feeding it because it was there a lot. And it was a beautiful cat. And Jenna took a liking to it and ended up naming it. And she named it Gwendolyn. And Catherine, my friend, was like, "Well, that's an interesting name, but sure. I mean, you're almost 3, or she was probably 3 by then, because her birthday is in January."
That's a mouthful for a 3-year-old.
Gwendolyn. I mean, think about it. I don't even...
Where do you come up with that?
I guess the only character I can think of is the Wizard of Oz.
I don't know, but kitty or furry, or I mean, that's something the 3-year-old to me would come up with. But go ahead.
Sure, not Gwendolyn. So we were all kind of baffled by this name, and so, but decided, okay, yeah. So Catherine, my friend, asked her, like, where'd you get that name Gwendolyn? And Jenna just casually said, oh, well, it's Ann Rees's friend. And Catherine told me, and I'm like, oh, it's very interesting. And we didn't, think much about it because she didn't really probe her because she was playing with her toys. Like, she's just in her own little world. And we're like, oh, that's really sweet. Like, whatever happened, who knows? So, but we were kind of hopeful, like, okay, has Ann Rees been coming to visit? Or like, what's going on here? Just who knows about the spirit world? Like, how does all that work? I don't know. But, so, side note, after Ann Rees passed away, my mom's dad, who spent a lot of time with Ann Rees because my aunt lived next door, and Ann Rees spent a lot of time with my aunt, and then they would go next door to my papa's house, and they would hang out with him, build fires, and hit golf balls in the yard, and all the stuff. So he just embraced her, loved her, and we went to his house to tell him that she had passed away. Because my mom felt like we needed to do it in person. He had Alzheimer's, early stages, but we decided to go in person, and he was upset, very upset, and he told us about his little sister that passed away, which my mom had never known about, and he said she was about 3 years old as well.
She had no idea that he had a little sister that passed away when he was a kid?
No.
Okay.
I think they just shoved it under the, we've chosen to do the opposite of that, but I think they just I think she passed away from polio or something. And it's the first we had heard of it. So he tells us that her name was Naomi and she passed away from a sickness. Fast forward 18 days after Ann Rees passed away, he fell the same night that Janie was born. So we're in the same hospital. So my mom comes to me and sits on my hospital bed. I'm holding Janie, and I could see it all over her face that something was wrong. And she says that Papa's downstairs. He's fallen. He's probably not going to make it. I know what you're thinking, like, wow. Like, how much can one family handle? So they take him home, and we go to our house. And so my mom's dealing with a daughter who's lost a child, a granddaughter who's passed away, us leaving her house, getting acclimated back to our own home without Ann Rees and our new quote unquote normal, and then taking her dad home to die in his house, because that was his request and what she thought he would want. So he passes away 6 weeks later. So we're going through his things afterwards, and we come across the tombstone of Naomi, and I'll just send you a picture of it. But it says Naomi Gwendolyn Knowles and her date. I mean, the word Gwendolyn was like in my mind when I saw it, literally highlighted. And I'm thinking, this child was around the same age. Ann Rees has found her in heaven. And now...
And that's her friend.
And that's her friend. And somehow they're visiting Jenna. Don't know how all that works.
I don't either. But
how can you...
world? Yeah.
And her tombstone says, our little darling, she budded on earth to bloom in heaven. Naomi Gwendolyn Knowles. How in the world did that name get to Jenna? And Jenna so confidently say that was Ann Rees's friend.
There's a lot of questions around that. That's pretty awesome. Other times where you feel like the presence of God might have been pretty overwhelming?
Yes. So I know we had talked about Ann Rees, and we had the cake for her celebration of life.
Yeah.
So one of my friends, Elizabeth, she actually made the cake, And when I say friends, we were like a few years apart in school, so more of acquaintances.
Yeah.
And I didn't know her kids. She didn't know my kids. She just made the cakes, and we kind of connected on Facebook. But her children had no idea who Ann Rees was. So she dropped the cake off the Door of the Explorer cake at the Celebration of Life. And we had these buttons, and it's Ann Rees's picture. She takes the button home with her. Well, she keeps it in her glove box. And her 4 or 5 year old son, like probably, I don't know, a little while later, I think she said it was like over a 3-week span or whatever. She said that they go through the glove box because they're cleaning out the car. And he says, and I'm going to pull this up because I want to get exactly his words, because I think it's profound from a 4-year-old that he would say, he says, "Hey, Mama, I know this little girl. She lives in heaven with Jesus now." And he said it very matter-of-factly. And she said that they don't have a computer at their house. There's no way he would have seen anything about Ann Rees, never would have seen a picture of Ann Rees. She didn't share with him the story of Ann Rees because she didn't want to upset her son. You know, there's no need to share that story because he didn't even know her. And so she just kind of kept quiet. And she prayed that she said, "Okay, Lord, if this is real, show me again." And she said a few seconds later, after praying that, Ethan said, "Mama, did you hear me? I said, I know this little girl. I've talked to her before. She said she told me she lives in heaven with Jesus. Did you hear me?" And the mom said, "Elizabeth, my friend, yes, Ethan, I heard you. How do you know who she is?" And he said, "Sometimes she talks to me, and she told me that she died and that she lives in heaven with Jesus now, and that in heaven it is a very happy place, and she isn't sad there, and there's no crying in heaven." And she's still not believing what she's hearing. And she said, "Okay, Ethan, do you know what her name is?" Kind of testing him, like mind just blown. And she said that on the sticker, it does have Ann Rees's name, but she said he couldn't read. He's 4 years old. And it was written in cursive. So there's no way that he would have known her name. And he says, "I can't remember, Mommy, but she has 2 names. Not like Ethan, that she has 2 names." So conversation ended. Fast forward, I don't know how long, but she took the sticker and she put it on a shelf next to their back door. And a few days later, he said he saw the picture and he said, "Oh, Mama, I asked the little girl in heaven what her 2 names were, and she said Ann Rees." And and to tell you that she gets to sit in Jesus' lap now, and that she is not scared of him. And then he went on to say, because she went ahead and explained to him that she actually had passed away and that she was a real little girl and she did live in heaven now. And he could see that she was sad. And she said, "Oh, Mama, you don't have to be sad. She is in a much better place and we'll see her again one day."
How old was this child at the time?
4. I just feel like I don't know what happens. I just have to believe that before she officially was in heaven, or God gave these kids this vision. Maybe she wasn't really here. I have no idea how any of that works. That's on my list of questions when I get to heaven and I'm sitting on the porch looking at the lake. But I have to believe that these things are not coincidence, that they are a gift from God to point it. I mean, immediately I felt his presence. Immediately I was jaw dropped, felt so loved that this message had been brought to me from this child. And just, I could picture Ann Rees and Jesus and her sitting in his lap, and no pain, no suffering, and we'll get to see her again. Like, that message came from a 4-year-old somehow.
So that is a gift from God. That is God intervening in their lives to intervene in yours, to point you. I hear things like this, doing what I do now, in the conversations I have now, and I didn't realize this before because I was in the secular world and really busy and run around all over the place, and the noise of life drowned out the spiritual life.
Mm-hmm.
But I've slowed it down, and I have conversations with people like you and many others who have talked through experiences similar to those. And Jesus didn't have to come to earth and do the signs that he did. I think he did the signs as gifts to us.
Yeah.
To show us that there is more than what we see in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
It's the problem I have with science and atheists and others who say there is nothing else because we can't see something else.
Wow.
You know, we can put on night vision goggles and literally see something that we can't see with our natural eyes.
Yeah.
Infrared, you look at pictures from the telescopes.
Yeah.
The naked eye picture is one, infrared, completely different. So the concept of being able, that there being something that exists that can't be seen with our eyes or measured with the tools we are familiar with in our world, I think we're extraordinarily arrogant to think that nothing else exists because we can't see it.
True.
And I think God pulls that veil back every now and then.
Yeah, in powerful ways, in moments that we absolutely need it.
And can't explain it another way.
And he does it through people that I go,
is this what he saw?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm looking at the image that's ready to be put on. It's the exact image that he's looking at. The words that are written on here are in cursive. There are 7 words on here, and they are over a monogram. And so I have to read closely, and I wouldn't, if I didn't understand stuff like this, wouldn't know where her name would be on here at all. I see it now.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you, a 3-year-old is looking at that girl's face.
Yeah.
And face alone, and that looks like some crazy, it looks like scribbling down below that only adults can recognize. So
even, when you
I'm just going to tell you, kid didn't read her name.
No. And Ann Rees, it's a very unique name. It's not like it's Caitlin.
But it also is written Ann Rees Grote on here, and so
he just used the double name.
Yeah, that's something. That's legit, and that's a gift, that you guys should treasure forever. That is, my kids have done and said things that I look around and I realize they are far closer to the kingdom of heaven than I am, and that they can see things that I don't see, and I don't think it's cute. I think it's powerful. I think it's awesome. And I sit as a student when they start talking in those ways. And the older they get, the less that happens. But that 3, 4, 5-year-old range, some of the stuff that came out of them, it brings me to attention is what it does. And I think those are beautiful.
Oh, I got to tell you too, Janie, whenever we lived at our old house and I was changing her diaper, so I think she'd just gotten up from a nap, and we talked about Sissy a lot. She saw pictures of her. We celebrate her life at the graveside every Christmas Eve. So she's submerged into this world with us of grief and missing her sister, but she's young, so she's still in diaper phase. And I got her out of bed one day and later on her changing table, and I think I was having a really rough day, and she had a passy and a lisp as well, and she took her passy out and she goes, "Sissy come." And I was like, "What?" So, "Sissy come." So all I could think of, and that means what she was saying is "Sissy come."
Sure.
Was that somehow in her dream or, in her room while she was asleep? I have no idea, but something happened in her little mind, and that's all she told me. But I just had so much peace in that moment. Kind of look around like, where is she?
Yeah, yeah, and I think doubters would say, those are the imaginings of a grieving mother, and it's not when you have these kids in these multiple instances that have come from various corners of your circles say, it's going to sound however it's going to sound, but here's what happened. Here's an appearance that seems out of the ordinary, and you begin to see these things and hear them, and you're like, boy, that's a strange coincidence. And then you just get to the point where you have so many coincidences that it's not a coincidence anymore. It's just a pattern, and it points to the truth of the spiritual life. It doesn't point to me because I've just seen it so many times. It doesn't point to holding on to some sort of superstitious spiritual non-existence, hoping against hope that these things are true. It's hard. You can't explain to me a 3 or 4 year old kid seeing that picture and saying the things that they said about her, who's never seen her.
So matter of fact. And then the cat, where'd the cat? Oh, and then by the way, the cat left shortly after. Gone. Never to be seen again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like God's real, right?
Yeah. Maybe he came in the cat form.
Yeah, maybe she did. And I'll ask you a question, and this might be an offline conversation, but have you ever dug into experiences that people have had who believe they have visited heaven?
Yes, of course. I have books. I have a new book on my that a friend gave me on Monday, 90 Minutes in Heaven, I believe.
Yeah, I've read that one.
Yeah, my kids. So, Heaven is for Real.
Mm-hmm.
We read that. We let our kids watch the movie, and I mean, it was a lot for them. It probably was not quite appropriate, but because it did take them to I miss my sister. Do you think I'd go to heaven and see her? That kind of conversation.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, the neuroscientist doctor, yes, that died, who I think he was a non-believer before, that became a believer after he died and came back, and he had this whole experience. I'm very fascinated by those things that happen, and even if they made them up,
well,
I'm like, wow.
Interestingly enough, I mean, I one of the things that I have studied over the last, 8 months or so, and is near-death experiences where people have been declared clinically dead. We've had a couple on here, and were revived.
Yeah.
And the things that they saw, and there's a lot of science around that now, more so than before, and of non-believers that are doing these things that are, and then finding similarities in the stories. I've read several books that detail what they experienced and the ways that they describe it, and they always describe it as far more real than what we experience in our earthly environment. I think one of the books is called Imagine Heaven. I'll send it to you or something like that. It's really powerful. I would think, though, when I read those books and I have encounters with people like you who are bereaved parents, and when I have close people that have passed, when I consider what are accounts of people who are normal, functioning, intelligent members of society report back on their experience. And even on here, I've had a handful on here, including Amy Bentner, whose child drowned and miraculously walked out of the hospital 7 days later, 4 years old, and describes what he experienced.
Oh, wow.
And she had this, guilt, thinking that he suffered. It was a drowning. He was underwater for 15 minutes, and he couldn't, he's a baby. He's 4 years old. He couldn't get out, and just horrible to think about what he must have experienced. But when she asked him about it, he said, "No, Mama, I was in a whirlpool, and then I was flying."
Oh, wow.
It was like
no pain.
It was it was instant. All the things that in her mind, that he was fighting for life, and Mom was nowhere to be found. And he's sinking under the water, and he couldn't. All that, none of that.
Oh,
he said, "No, I was flying." He's like, "Mom, I flew right through you."
Oh.
And he said, "Then I flew up." And then he describes Jesus. So he was like instantly in the arms of Jesus. It wasn't like he was being tortured in this...
Waiting.
Yeah, and in pain and couldn't breathe and all these other things that go into our heads go to these places. And the more I have read about this and listened to interviews and studied or whatever, and then considered that we serve a God who is love and mercy, it only makes sense that our kids and our loved ones don't experience the horrific things that we fear that they experienced, that they're immediately in heaven.
Yeah.
And it's all good.
Yeah.
And
It's
blessed.
home.
And I wonder, for me, that has made a difference in situations where I have experienced loss, knowing with confidence that they not only are in a better place, but it happened instantly. And
I know that makes me think
the
like
pain's for us.
Yeah, with Ann Rees being from, going from the accident to them trying to save her for, I think the accident was at 3:30. She died at 9:45. So however many hours that is, I've often wondered about that. I've never thought that she was in pain because she was unconscious the whole time. And I think of it like as in a surgery, when somebody's under anesthesia, if you will, then they don't feel the pain. And so that's my hope, is that while she was still alive here on earth, that there was no pain because she wasn't really there.
Yeah. Well, and even in a lot of the near-death experiences, as if they were being worked on, whether it was on the side of the road or a hospital room or whatever, that their consciousness, their spirit, separated from their bodies and saw the work being done on them.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And was above it. So was apart from it, not experiencing it.
Like the pain and the suffering. Yeah.
And what I find probably the most fascinating on that is like, okay, could that be the workings of a brain that's ceasing to exist and all this other stuff, and dying brain and all that other stuff? But in many cases, they had accounts where those spirits felt like they left the room and went to other rooms.
Seeing other people. I remember hearing like one of the stories, like they saw their mom in a different room or something, or
eating a snack of some kind or whatever. And they came back and they're like, "Did you do this?" And they're like, "Yeah."
How'd you know that?
It's like, I saw you.
Yeah.
And which indicates to me that the consciousness or the spirit continues to exist after the body. And the fact that the person wasn't in the body that was experiencing the trauma.
Right.
And so I just wonder if you dug into that kind of stuff. I'm fascinated by that. I think that would be a thing that brings me peace.
Yeah.
To know that my child...
For sure. I mean, I've got a book over there all about heaven. And I mean, I try so hard to remember. And we talked about the enemy and how he... I said, okay, I don't really deal with guilt. Don't really deal with what was the other one? Guilt and
blame.
Yeah. But what I do deal with is fear.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I didn't think about that, but fear that something else is going to happen. I mean, it's been crippling for sure in ways, especially as my kids get older and they have freedom to go to a friend's house without us, or ride in a car with like another parent. I hug my husband when he goes out of town, like I'm never going to see him again. And I try to paint a picture in my mind, because I'm very visual, of that last moment. If that were our last moment, I want to remember it exactly how it was. And I mean, that's the enemy.
Yeah.
That is nothing but the enemy. But I work through it. So our counselor, this started very early on. And our counselor said, with situations like this, walk through it. Go all the way. Okay, let's say that he did get in a car wreck and he died. You get a knock on the door. Oh, she said, what happens next? And I said, okay, I guess somebody comes to tell us, and I fall apart. We go through the whole thing. We go through, okay, now it's his funeral, or, and I talk about it with the children as well. You've buried him. Now you got to go find your new normal. What does that look like? In all these instances, I survive, and I, quote unquote, make it through the tragedy. And I realize that God is still good and that he still cares for me and he's still holding me, even though the worst has happened. And I have to do that all the time, because there's such a sense, and now I fear like something's going to happen to me and then my kids are going to be here without me. Death is just so relevant to me. It's so real. It is like,
yeah,
it's inevitable. It's going to happen again. Who's next? So every day I pray, Stacy, that Jesus comes back and we all go together. I'm not kidding. The other day I heard a loud noise and I ran out to my back porch thinking, is this it? Is that him? Looking up, so happy. This is it.
Yeah.
Here he is. Because then we could just all go together and then nobody has to be left behind suffering and having to figure out all the things that we've had to figure out along the way to get to the point of living simultaneously with heartache and joy and acceptance that we're separated from Ann Rees, and also the assurance of heaven that we will see her again.
And knowing that the story's not over.
No.
I don't know how you do it. It's amazing to listen to your faith and the Holy Spirit's presence in your family. And I know that there are going to be people that listen to this that are in similar places that have questions and don't know what to do. And I listen to you. It sounds like you stay close in your faith. You stay close to God. You prayed through things. I think you talked about journaling and that whole prayer thing and journal thing. And I think that's a really important piece. I mean, is there a thing that you have that you say, yeah, here's what I would say to somebody who's entering this phase now?
I would say live in the present. Take it one moment at a time. And those moments are going to be super hard. Literally feel like you cannot put one in front of the other. But use your resources. Use your community around you to love on you. And also don't put the instance in a box. Don't put your child in a box. I know you want to just put it away, pack up all their things, take all the pictures down, never speak of them again. This actually happened to a lady who we never even knew that she had a child that died. And she came to me at my mom's house during those 18 days that we were there. And we never knew that she had a kid that was run over. And she said, I made the biggest mistake by moving, getting rid of all of his things, telling my family never to mention his name again, and dismissing it. She said, I have suffered. Please do not do the same thing. And I don't know that I necessarily would have done that, but just having her say that to me, it stuck with me.
Yeah. Hiding it doesn't make it go away.
Doesn't.
Yeah.
It just puts a Band-Aid on it. And guess what? It's just going to, the problem's just going to get bigger, and you're going to have to keep putting bandages on it and keep putting more. And then it's all going to explode one day.
Yeah. You guys, from what I know of you, you tend to celebrate her life, and you celebrate her existence in heaven. You celebrate her effect on others. You've created a platform really where she can continue to act as a minister. Yes. And I didn't know about this, but you got you mentioned the Facebook page a couple of times ago. I believe it's Remembering Ann Rees.
Yeah.
So Facebookers, go check out and follow. Like
Yeah.
remembering Ann Rees, you'll learn some stuff.
And I say go back. Like I used to write, like I said, I wrote on it. If you go back to like 2013, that whole year is just full of amazing moments where God turned my suffering into purpose.
Yeah.
And he turned my suffering into thanksgiving. And I'm so thankful that I have those documented. That's the kind of thing I want to take and put in a book, because that's the meat of it. Like right now, I write on her page some. Like I try to keep people up to date on like what the girls are doing. Like Janie got saved January 7th this year. Yes, and got baptized. And so like I share moments like that, but I don't necessarily share what I used to share, because
Right.
I don't experience it as much anymore as far as those really dark grief moments.
Sure.
I do, and it's like, I don't want to say time makes it better, because it's time, but it's also you have to choose how you're going to spend that time. Because in grief, they say, oh, time's going to make it better. Time's going to make it better. Well, it's not going to make it better if you put it in a box.
Yeah.
And then you deal with it later. If time passes, well, you may be dealing with it on the other side of the time, as far as dealing with it while you're going through it and not pushing it aside. Everybody's timeline looks way different, but I do feel like time does help, but it's how you spend that time and what you choose to focus on and how you choose to manage your grief and to celebrate your loved one and to honor your loved one and not try to hide it. Speak their name. Like I love when people tell me stories of Ann Rees and how, oh, remember that time she did this? Or, Facebook will bring up memories. And a lot of times I'll share those on my page and Ann Rees's page too, of just cute moments of her. And those they make me sad. The memories that pop up make me just want to like jump through the screen and hold her and love on her. What makes me sad now, though, is all the time we've missed with her. The moments that, a 10th birthday, a riding her bike for the first time without training wheels, a heartbroken by a boy, which probably wouldn't have happened just yet, but who knows?
It's getting close.
Yeah, no kidding. So it's things like that that now make me sad and make me go back to the writing and the reliving grief. But I do think that I'm in a really good place of God has delivered me from those moments of just pain that grasps you in this feels like chains.
Yeah. You guys also have been doing she's attached to a fundraiser run.
Yeah. The Bunny Hop.
Bunny Hop, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's down near the coast again, down in Orange Beach, I think.
It is. So that's where, she lived. And so I was part of the Junior Women's Club down there.
Yep.
And we raise money for kids that don't have clothes. It goes back to the clothes. Like we pack backpack. This is whenever I lived down there, we'd pack backpacks and make sure kids had uniforms for school and give them to them. And so, so this year is so we've had the Bunny Hop actually started the year before Ann Rees passed away. Like I was there volunteering. Ann Rees was at home with Davey and it was early in the morning, so they didn't come. But then the second year is whenever they asked if they could do it in her memory and her honor. And we actually started a scholarship fund and we give a kid in the area, either Gulf Shores or Orange Beach, we do an Ann Rees Grote Memorial Scholarship. So it's really special because somebody from our family or one of our friends will go present it. And you never know how that impacts people. But this past race in Orange Beach, after the race was over, one of the dads came up to me. His daughter actually got the scholarship the year before. And she was at Auburn and he was telling us all about it. And he said, he just thanked us. And it's not even like a huge scholarship, but he was so appreciative. And he just said how much it meant to him because it was part of that community and her story still is very relevant in that community. because I think we've tried to keep it alive through this race and her scholarship, and people know the story. So it meant a lot to them, and they thanked us for keeping this going. And so this upcoming year, it's the bunny hop, the 5K, and it's also a 1 mile fun run. And we try to make it fun. We have the Easter bunny comes. It's actually going to be April 8th, which is Easter weekend. So we're already planning it, and we've got t-shirts, and people from all over buy these t-shirts, and they will post pictures of them wearing them, even if they couldn't come, and put it on the page. And so it's a blessing. Like, there's a community that has followed her and our story that has helped us get to the place that we are. And they say that I helped them. They have no idea what they've done.
It's
and
the
they say
of
her
God,
story has helped them. And I'm like, oh, you have no idea.
It's the movement of God. Things work together for good, and we wouldn't sign up for things that we have to experience sometimes, but God always shapes them in a way that good comes from it if we allow him to do that. If we don't try to block him and thwart his efforts, and he has good things in store, even in the face of the hardest things you could ever imagine. And to see these things come from the legacy that is Ann Rees. Lived 2 years on this earth, and she speaks through that social media page. And I encourage people to go and follow it. You're not going to read all sad stories. It's life in that page, and it's the presence of God in that page. And it's I started following it recently, and as we were reconnecting, and I'm thankful I've done that. But you got the run, and we're going to be praying for you on this book.
Thanks. I'm sitting here looking at. I wrote this. I don't know if you want me to read it to you guys, but I wrote this a little while back, and do you want me to share it?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is like I don't know. I sit on my porch. I told you that earlier, and I love nature so much. I love being outside. Like if you come in my house and it's in the afternoon and it's a nice, even it could be sprinkling like it was last night. I'm kicking the ball with the dog. Girls are on the trampoline. Like, I just like being outside. So this is something I wrote March 31st. It says, as I sit on our back porch, rain falling, thunder in the distance, my prayers asked for a sign, a direction. As soon as I got still and quiet, you answered. Amazing Grace hummed in the background, and you answered, I'm home. I don't need a home somewhere else. One of the reasons that I wrote this backstory, I love... So we don't live in houses for very long. I love moving. I love change. I love to redecorate. I like all those types of things. And so I always kind of crave change. And I remember one time I was sitting on the porch and praying about it, like, should we move, God? And I look up and he says, no, this is a gift. Like, sit. Because that's hard for me.
Yeah.
Sitting and being still is hard for me. So let me go back to this. Okay. So it says, I don't need a home somewhere else. As soon as these thoughts flooded my mind, a clan of birds flew on the newly budded trees. The one who caught my eye shined bright among them, a cardinal, beautifully made. It sat on a branch eye level to me just beyond our fence. The little sparrows floated by as if they were dancing in the presence of the red bird's beauty. Amazing Grace continued to hum, and I heard, what can wash away my sin? Nothing but the blood of Jesus. Those words struck me, and in that moment, I felt the weight of our home as a gift. These birds, this home, this is our own heaven on earth for me to see him. I realized long ago I crave his creativity, his nature. This home surrounded by the lake, a bowl of trees, all full of his creations. His little birds, his squirrels. As the seasons change, I change. My mood changes. But what stays the same is my base. Right now, the pollen is insane. Alice can barely go outside without Benadryl at night, yet still waking to swollen eyes in the morning. As the song still plays, I hear, what can wash away my sin? Nothing but the blood of Jesus. Just as the rain falls, washing away the pollen, Yet it adds so much to every plant, so it can add more pollen. It's a cycle, adding to the nature all around. I feel like this house and this moment are mirroring the cycle of my life. This house is a gift, a space for me to immerse myself in nature, to sit still in his presence, so I can help pollinate my girls as they grow. Seasons. I'm surrounded by beautiful outward changes in my yard. Right now, some trees look as though they're skeletal remains and will never reemerge from the grips of bareness. Next to those trees is a tree with new leaves, as neon green as they can be. A color representing newness, growth, wonder of what's to come. This tree gives hope to the others around it. Can you hear the trees talking? Hey, how did that happen to you? You look like me yesterday. The green leaf tree doesn't have a good answer, but we do. Jesus. We let him be our guide. We believe in his promises. We didn't give up hope in the life around us. We noticed victories in others who beamed neon green. We noticed the miracles in other people's stories. Their songs whispered to our hearts. Your painful season will grow into a new life, new love, new joy. You just have to walk into it and believe. And guess what? It's free. Jesus already paid for it. Whatever season you are in, look around. Do you notice someone is in a green season? If so, watch them, learn from them. Also, if you are beaming green, look around. Who among you needs a boost into their next season? How can you help? Let's all be a part of each other's victories in Christ.
Amy Grote, thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you for sharing Ann Rees with not just us, but so many. She is blossoming in ways that you couldn't imagine before now, and it's through you, and it's through your family, and thanks for sharing your faith, because you guys leaned into the Holy Spirit. You guys leaned into the presence of God in times when it was hard, and it's changed you, and you're a new person of faith with a bright future of faith ahead of you. And we're going to be cheering you on and watching the whole way. And I just appreciate you taking time and sharing it with us today.
Oh, thank you for asking me. It's been a pleasure. I really needed this. You have no idea. Before going into the 10-year anniversary, I needed to sit down and tell her story again.
Well, we're honored it's with us. And Merry Christmas.
Yes. Thank you.
The life of a bereaved parent must be one of the most difficult imaginable. I'm sure of it. But it's also often a place where the rest of us can learn of the holy. When people of faith see goodness, mercy, and love, when they see God as they're bearing their children, the rest of us should pay attention. I think that God places the keys to gratitude, trust, fulfillment, and eternal peace in places such as this. Amy and Davey Grote, surrounded by an amazing family and community, chose to walk through, not around, the unimaginable with their eyes on God and their heart in constant prayer. 10 years later, I think Amy will tell you that she'll never be through it, but that she does live with joy and gratitude as she sees the goodness and presence of God walking with her and her family every day. And Ann Rees, she's ministered to more people in the past 10 years than most of us will in our lifetimes. And I think that she and Gwendolyn smile about that every day. Thank you for joining us today on A Stronger Faith. To learn more about the story of Ann Rees and her ministry in this world, I recommend you visit and follow the Facebook page, Remembering Ann Rees. For more episodes like this one, to recommend a guest, or to support this ministry, please visit astrongerfaith.com. Until next time, we pray for peace, a stronger faith, and wish a very Merry Christmas to you and those you love.